Thank you for tuning in to another excellent episode of the Keva
and Milla Show,
Reaching and Connecting Minds. Today's guest is Pastor Hill of Ephesians Primitive Baptist Church. Okay.
Yes.
What is Primitive Baptist? What is that?
Well, let's begin. We can trace our roots to slavery. We have like 5 associations within the Middle Tennessee area, starting with Big Harpeth, and its incipiency began in 1865. Wow. A former slave was the first moderator. Then you have Lynn Creek, which is in Franklin, Tennessee, which was organized in 1872, of course, by slaves and free slaves. You have Cumberland in 1880. You have Ironside, which is in Mount Pleasant, Tennessee, Columbia area. Mm-hmm. And you have Friendship in Winchester, Tennessee. So we really can trace our roots back to slaves and being slaves and children of slaves, and how God has given us a grace to sustain some type of spiritual and moral integrity as Primitive Baptists. And as you move through our timeline, which is very, very, very rich, in Nashville alone, in the early 1920s, 30s, and 40s, there was a guy who's my cousin named Zema Hill. And if you ask any person that's seasoned / old head, they'd tell you he was like the Bishop Walker before there was Bishop Walker. And he helped just galvanize the people through the church. And he had a funeral home business. So it was just, he was just the man, you know. So that is a kind of, you know, a little sketchy historical fact about being primitive. Okay. And now here we are in the new millennium, and guess what? We're trying to attract all these millennials, you know. So some things are changing, but the more they change, the more they remain the same. Even our worship style, sometimes we have hymns, long meter, which were sung by slaves. And so we carry a tradition of 150 years sometimes in our worship service. So it's a very historical feeling. And, you know, to the millennials, to the young folk, I don't want to do that. What are y'all saying? Yes. But it's educational. But it keeps us connected to our history. So primitive is a whole lot of things.
Whole lot of things. So you all do have your organ and your okay. I was just thinking hymn boom.
Yeah, now that it's new, you know, 60 years in. But yeah, we do have the more neo-Pentecostal worship service as well. So, you know, we get it in like that because you have to, you know, have a diversity of music to reach everybody. But for grandmama, great-grandmama, mother, dear grandmammy, all those people, they need to connect with what they connect with. And that's one of the things, that's one of the struggles that we're having in Christendom is finding that worship for everybody because we're so diverse. 25 years ago, it wasn't that much diversity, you know, but now with iPhones, technology, things are changing. And then grandmama and them stayed in church for 3 hours, brought the chicken, potato salad, devil eggs.
I'm ready to stay for another service.
Come on now. Our kids, we go home, mama. Opera Mills, Green Hills, we got to go. And then with, you know, other things so that that's pulling on their strings. But we're just going through some transformation right now. This is a good one. It's a good one.
So how long have you been pastoring this church?
I just arrived there this year, but I've been in pastoral ministry since 1998.
Wow.
So I'm 40, so all of my adult life, I know pastoral ministry. I am the son of a preacher, and you know that stigma about preachers' kids. Just say this. My influences in the day were NWA and Too Short. I woke up listening to Eazy-E.
Okay.
So, you know, I was just Master P, about it, Mystical, Jay-Z, just that normal kid. That's my father. But on my mother's side, like we trace our roots back to like 1872 with my great-grandmother.
Wow.
And we got papers on her. So I've been in church for 5 generations. I just had to go feel myself. And as you look closely, I have a scar on my head and a dent and screws and wires. That's my little Damascus Road experience where God had to put some sense into me at 15.
I was going to ask you that. What kind of gave you that driven effort to be in the ministry field?
Well, being in church, and that's kind of like all, you know, being in lights. I was in a studio radio at 4 or 5. My mom was the radio host on Sunday.
Okay.
So I'm used to this. She's a communication major from TSU, so it was driven and instilled in me. She had me watching Tony Brown's journals, and all 60 Minutes was like a must. You coming in, all of those things. But when it came to ministry, I really didn't want to do it because, you know, I wanted to be young.
Yeah.
I wanted to be buck. I wanted to be me.
With those guidelines.
Yeah, it's like, I want to go to church, though. I never gave up on church, but, you know, back in the day, coming to Nashville, to TSU homecoming, seeing the lights and the pageantry,
Yes.
the clubs, you know, Jefferson Street, Vanderbilt.
Yeah.
I just wanted to live. And I told the Lord, I'll be a preacher when I get older. Let me do some living first.
Right.
15 years old, never forget, December 22nd, 1992. 10:13, we driving. We were doing some things we shouldn't have been doing at that age, you know. Dabbling in some things we shouldn't have been dabbling in. We hit a guardrail,
Oh,
of
wow.
course. You see what you see. At that moment, that was the really first time I heard God speak. I wasn't even listening though, but that's the first time. He said, I got something for you to do. So I'm at Vanderbilt Hospital on December 22nd. December 23rd, this guy beside me died.
Oh, wow.
So I'm 15, you know, I don't think I'm cute. Got a few ladies, you know.
Oh, yeah.
You know, on three-way. You remember three-way?
Oh, yeah.
Three-way.
Yeah.
Click it over, you know. We didn't have Instagram and Snapchat.
Yes.
That's how we have our technology.
Yes.
God said he had something for me to do. And I was like, really? But at that moment, you know, I was bedridden and I was broken. And I wasn't just broken physically, I was broken mentally. Because I was trying to be that street guy that I saw in imagery, the boys in the hood. I was
Yes.
trying to be that.
Yes.
But God reeled me in. And I've always enjoyed church, though, because it was my outlet. And from that moment on at 15, once I healed up, I said, okay, God, if whatever you got for me, it's for me.
It's for you.
I was still a little perturbed, you know, because I hadn't even gone to college, you
Wow.
know. Black Beach, you remember those?
Yeah.
You know, I hadn't even done that. So, Freaknik, just throw
Yeah.
it out there, the real stuff.
Yeah.
That was our draw.
Oh, yes.
I did it, though. I got there.
Yeah.
But I know I needed to do what the Lord called me to do. As you had mentioned earlier on the show about pursuing your passion and profiting from your passion. God has always allowed me to speak. He's always given me that gift. My friends tell me in the sixth grade I preached on the playground.
Wow.
I mean, but you know, I just always had it. And I've always just knew that's where I needed to be. But I just wanted to do it when I got older.
Yes. Want to live your life, like you said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there was no young preachers around. See, I'm from the country, Winchester. So, like, when I got to Nashville, there were kid preachers. You know, you had a peer that was a preacher who was 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. Where there was none. So I didn't have anybody to identify with.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I want to do what everybody else is doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you say you wanted to just live your normal life as a kid, and you didn't want to be a preacher. Is there any type of criteria it takes to be a preacher? Because everyone does wrong, and you can't get away from wrong. So you're going to do wrong.
So we know that you can go to school and you know, get all your divinity things and all that. But is there something, because I mean people want to know, is there something that arises in you and says,
Because like you said,
I'm a preacher.
he had spoke to you.
Yeah.
spoke.
So what I mean, so that's a special calling. Would we say that?
That is a special calling, and you're right about the divinity. But God used the worst people in the scripture to really get his word across, other than his son. I mean, you look at the 12 disciples, they were cussing, cutting, fighting, drinking with Jesus.
Yes.
So we always want this picture perfect person to be a pastor when there's no perfect people. I will say this, I was reading a book, and God sees men like he sees perfection, and that's flawed. We all are flawed.
Oh, yeah.
And we have to get to that place in our life where you can embrace somebody for who they are, flaws and all. And God can use you. Like, you hear God through circumstances. I heard him specifically say to me, I need you to preach my word. And I don't think my calling is greater than anybody else's calling, because he might tell somebody, I need you to be a politician. I need you to be a school teacher. You know, he gifts us. Yeah. But we've put such a premium now And we got all the lights and the pageantry on preachers, you know, and the shows, you know, that glamorize things and from the past. So, you know, that's where it gets real iffy now.
Right. I was curious. my father, you know, he's deceased and I love him to death, so that's my daddy. But he always said that he had a calling, and he said that I can't go because he wanted, like you said, he still wants to live his life, but he would say I can't go. So that's why I was just kind of like curious on how that worked.
So let me ask you something. With this new millennium and all the social networks that's allowing us to connect and gain some knowledge, good and bad, what do you say to those people who are now saying, because I'm sure you've heard it, that Jesus is not real? And I know you've heard it because I've heard it.
Of course.
You know, it's circling, it's circling around. And what would you say to that? Whether, I don't know if it's lost or if it's awakened or asleep, or what would you say? Because people have lost hope in the church. That's where I see a lot of this stemming from.
Right. Well, that's a loaded question. With technology and the way we think now is just totally different. It is very difficult for people to believe in the stories of the Bible. How did a fish swallow Jonah?
Yes.
Really? Like, really? You know, so some of those miracles and the miraculous works that we celebrate scientifically are very hard to, you know, embrace. So we're having a very challenging moment now in the church because we have to answer some questions that just not only answer faith, but have to deal with that science component. And where we are now, scientifically, like you said, we're changing. I mean, it's a challenge. It's a challenge. But Jesus is real. We know that. Our message does not change, but our method to teach people. Because if you come to the church where I pastor, I'm very transparent, and I want to have these type of things and dialogue where you make people think about what they think about. A lot of times we don't even think about what we think about. And now in this generation where sometimes you don't have to think because you can push buttons.
That's right.
So I'm trying to get the congregation and the whole denomination to start thinking about what we're thinking about. One of the things I'm doing is teaching John Maxwell how successful people think. So I'm going outside the box to use other things and other mediums to tap into people's intellectual abilities so they can actually absorb the truth.
Yes.
And the Bible says it. You should know the truth will set you free.
Yes.
But it's going to take some time. It's going to take some conversation. It's going to take a lot of collaboration, knocking on the doors, coming to church. Aunt Sally sending her little 3 kids. That day is almost over.
Yeah, and I think
it's over.
I think that's what a lot of people are getting, and they're not. And maybe you can see what you're saying. You have seen in the past that they're coming and they're seeing their regular routine and they're leaving. They may be okay for that afternoon, but what are you going to do when maybe you're going back to that same 9 to 5 who can't even pay your bills? So it's not even, if I ain't even getting spiritually fed, can I come and find out some knowledge that's going to help me in my livelihood?
Right. Well, let me answer that. That's what the church was established to do. It was to make a person holistic. See, we just tapped into that emotional component and thought that was it. When you look at the historical church scripturally, and then for the last 50 years, especially the African American church, remember civil rights movement, things that happened in the church historically was about the whole man/woman. It wasn't about just a pep rally. It was about making sure social reform was taking place to better our people. And I think that's where we have dropped the ball, that we are not, once again, making people think about what they need to think about. Social reform has to take place. When nobody had the African Americans back, the only thing they had was the church. Morehouse comes out of a church. Most of our schools come out of churches to help us think critically and become true disciples, not just people who are emotionally driven on 2 or 3 days a week and that's it. Because we need to understand, how do I survive when I'm not making ends meet? You know, the psychological parts of who I am just is just as important to God as my soul, because that's part of my soul anyway, my psyche. So I think as we're growing in church and becoming more transparent and charting new territory, we are really looking at the mental aspect of human beings now. You know, I love to still shout, you know, we get it down, you know, we get it. But when you leave church and you still dealing with something that you can't handle, how do you deal with it mentally? So there needs to be an awareness in the church. And I had spoken earlier with some individuals. One of the things we're addressing is the mental illness in the community.
Yes, yes.
I mean, let's just be honest, all the vile stuff was dumped in the African American community. And in the 90s, you know, church was just hands off. But now it's like, that's our loved one, our sons, our daughters, our uncles, you know. It's a mental illness. Let's deal with that. Let's help them. Not put them in the back room in the corner. Let's have talk. Let's get educated about what's really going on with that person, psychologically, neurologically, biologically, to make a person think the way they think.
I think what I'm hearing, and from some of my peers, and I think I heard you say it too, the church has kind of dropped the ball on its people and kind of conformed to the world a little bit. And our people feel a little hopeless. So I'm glad to hear some of the things you are doing. Let me ask you something. So what are some of the topics that you, as a pastor and personally, are a little touchy about, worldly issues that you see or hear about?
That's a gamut. But now, as a pastor now, those topics have to be talked about. Even now, my whole sermonic tone has changed. I'm using lingo from the streets as my titles. Like one of my favorite sermons last year was "Bye, Felicia, Get Your Life." So you know, you know that, and the church responded like, you know, of course, the kids,
because they was able to relate.
It was, and then you had to deal with those issues. You know, one of my other ones is called Behind the Eight Ball. You know, dealing with life. But when you start dealing with these issues like homosexuality, what do we talk? How do we deal with that in the church when it's been going on? When it originated from a culture that was dominating us. See, you have to trace things back to their root. I'm not behaving like this because I just want to do this. Something has been instilled in me through environment. So we're starting to have those discussions now. We're really starting to tap into, you can still be a lovable person and still have a whole lot of flaws, because nobody's perfect. And we're not moving perfection out the way, but we want to perfect people. Rather than make a person perfect, we want to try to perfect a person. And that's the tone that we have taken. Even the last presidential campaign, it's still a touchy subject.
Wanted to know, how important is this rally and this race to you in your community?
Oh, this race is unique, and we really need the race. You know, most of our people fail to understand what it costs us just to vote. For instance, it cost me $1.75 to vote in Texas. Marching, I've been marching with Dr. King since '64 to get people to vote. I would say to the community, I like for them to do some early voting. I call early voting enough time. You got 15 strikes. One day voting, just a single vote. So get on out and vote early, and let's put Hillary in office.
Let's put Hillary in office. What are some things that you believe that that Hillary is going to do that is going to help some of these younger folks that are having a lot of doubt about this election at all? What are some things that you can say to encourage them, those that are saying they are not going to vote? What are some things? I know you gave some examples of people actually dying for us having the right, but you know, this young age, my age, what would you say to really encourage them, or something, give them something they need them to know that they need to vote?
One of the things, we've got some good young people, you two, y'all are an example of what we have. I'm looking at a great percentage. Right here, it's at least 50% of good young people.
Yes.
You got to keep teaching folk, keep working with them. And some of these folks say they're not going to vote because they want somebody to beg them. But you better vote.
Yeah.
You don't vote, you'll be sorry.
So what do you think, or how important, I know it's important, but how important do you think this election is for Hillary to win over Donald Trump?
Well, you see, I'm a Democrat, so I've never voted for the Republicans. So I'm a little prejudiced. I won't. I don't care if Joe Blow was running. I would, and as a Democrat, I would vote for him. So I'm prejudiced. So don't get me on that one.
That'll get you on the roll. Yeah.
So with you being a Democrat your entire life versus a Republican, what are some of the big issues that Democrats have with the Republicans right now, so that way we can vote?
Well, the Republican Party don't want us. They don't want us. Democrat, it's a percentage. A long time ago, the NAACP went to the Democratic Party and said if they would do some things, we would vote for them. For instance, it was the Democratic Party that integrated the armed force for our soldiers. That's what the NAACP did. And people have to understand that we have a history. We're going to do what we have to do. And not only that, hell, Hillary going to win.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I definitely believe that Hillary is going to win
she's gonna
because
win.
right now women are very powerful. Hillary has a lot of positive standpoints behind her, and I think it's very important that we need to go out there as women also to go out there and voice our opinion.
Yeah.
So Keva, do you have anything else?
Yeah, no.
I just want to let everyone know to get out and vote.
Yes.
I'm standing here with one of the legendary civil rights movement, Reverend Tex Thomas, and he is urging and encouraging you all to get out and vote.
Yes.
And so I want to thank you for tuning in to the Keva and Milla show, reaching and connecting minds.
One of the things, this church, we're going to do early voting. We're going to get a bus load.
Wow.
And we're going to have cars on the 19th.
On the 19th.
The 19th, we'll be doing early voting. This church will be doing been doing early voting.
So how can they, do they need to give you a call, or how will they be able
This
to?
is for my church.
For your church only?
Yeah. Well, if somebody want to meet us up there, but my church, we're going to be meeting early voting.
Okay.
Okay. And so you heard it here. If you need a ride, the 19th, come and get you a ride.
Yes.
And we'll get you to the
We're
polls.
leaving here at 7:30 on the 19th
On the 19th.
for early voting.
For early
Going
voting.
to Howard School.
See, I remember back in the day when I was a little girl, they would go and they would pick up in the neighborhoods.
Yes.
They would pick up in the neighborhoods and
Yes.
take you to vote. That was a long time ago.
We picked up for voting
Uh-huh.
that day. We still do that. But early voting.
Early
Yes.
voting.
Yes.
Get your early vote in. So thank you.
We want to be visible.
We want to be visible. Thank you
Yes.
once again for tuning in to the Keva and Milla show. We're reaching and connecting minds, and we're signing out. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank
For case in point, he ain't my president. Yes, he
Yes,
is. Stop saying that.
Yes.
And you up in church, he ain't my president. Yes, he is. We owe it to that office. Even if you don't like a person, you respect the office.
That's true.
So we're just at a crossroads in the church, and we're trying to address the millennials because they have questions that they want answers from
yes.
immediately.
Yes.
Like, how can you say I can't do this when y'all done it? And that's what they
Yes.
say. Y'all did
Yeah,
it.
they've been hurt the most.
Yes.
They have.
they've
They have
Yes.
been, and you know, I've been debated on this, but especially through my people. And my mother was a real civil rights activist, but especially with those people, because they had it hard. I'm not trying to, but these millennials, what has been done to them?
Yes.
And it's not funny. It's
not funny.
you have to sometimes laugh to keep from
Well, it's the
crying.
technology, because you have technology and the social world raising your kids. Although you bring them home and they know what their ethics and manners are supposed to be, they go out to this world and society that they're trying to hang within everyone else. I mean, you got an iPhone, they need an iPhone, but mama can't afford an iPhone.
So what are we're getting ready to bring this to an end, and you know we could do
Go
two
all night.
segments and probably could not be done. What are some things that you have coming up?
Well, one of the things we're doing currently is to reach the generation and the masses. We feed children every day through a federally funded grant. Don't want to mention the schools, but we feed some high schools, Firebirds.
Gotcha.
Because I know that's a component that nutrition is really big. When people say you are what you eat, you really are what you eat. And I've taught in the 37208 zip code before, and I remember for lunch it was hot Cheetos and Takis.
Oh wow!
Like, how can I teach you algebra after that? You nothing is clicking and registering, and people don't know that has a mental and a physical effect on you. So we're doing that. Another thing we've done is we've gotten involved with sex trafficking, because it's coming so early now. Nobody thought it would ever come to us like it came, but you got all these Nashville's a hub for it, and to get some of the children that have come into sex trafficking.
Yes.
It's been a toil, but it opened me up to people's real pain. When you looking at somebody who's in sex trafficking and they're mascara and they're got great posture, but you know internally
they're hurting.
They're hurting, and I can't be the pastor that's not hands-on.
To go help them pick
Deal
them out
with
of
my
that situation.
pain.
Yes.
So tell the people where you are located and how they can get in contact with you, Mr. Hill.
Well, we are the church with the outward focus. We are Ephesians Primitive Baptist Church, 1506 22nd Avenue North. Hey, y'all, we right there off DP Tide. We are doing great things in community. And guess what? We want to help you connect with God and connect with your purpose. Come and join us every Sunday morning at 11 a.m. for worship, 9:30 Sunday school, and on Tuesday night, we have an awesome Bible study at 6 where we're discussing change. And then Thursday night, we have a prayer call that's awesome. You'll be blessed.
Well, I want to thank you so much for coming. You were very informative, and actually we'll probably have you back. And I expect future things from this church and from this guy. Be looking out. Thank you for tuning in to the Keva and Milla Show, Reaching and Connected Minds. See you next time.
Bye-bye.